Well, welcome everybody. My name is Andy Hoar. I'm the CEO of Paradigm B2B, which is a research and advisory services firm located in Chicago, Illinois. I'm also the co-founder of a community of Master B2B called Master B2B, which is a community of 50,000 e-commerce professionals around the world. Um, every so often, I get to do something really special, and today's an example of that. So. A little backstory. A couple of months ago, um, BigCommerce, I think many people know, BigCommerce made some pretty significant changes to the management team. And I approached them shortly thereafter and said, hey, there's been a lot of talk about BigCommerce. There were questions about whether it was for sale, a lot of rumors swirling. Now that you have a new CEO in place, I wondered if it'd be possible to have, a sit-down interview with the new CEO and have a candid conversation about where things stand and how things are going for the company. Because this is a very interesting time we're living in. We'll get into that in just a moment. But I wanted to see if it would be possible to do that. And much to my pleasant surprise, the team over at BigCommerce said yes. And so when they accepted, I said, let's arrange something, let's get it going. So just a little background here. So as we all know, BigCommerce is an e-commerce solution provider. Travis Hess, the new CEO, took the helm back, I think it was in September of last year. And it's been a bit of an adventure on the high seas for most e-commerce platforms. And I think BigCommerce is not an exception here. It's had its ups and downs. And so, like I said, I wanted to get a candid conversation going here. So this LinkedIn Live interview with Travis Hess will be his first broadcast interview since taking the role. And he's agreed to answer questions across a whole panoply of different areas, but most notably, the three we're going to focus on in the time we have is the recent changes at BigCommerce to the management team, the company's plan to win in a now pretty crowded market, and in particular, a bit more about their thinking on the B2B side of this crowded market, which is where I focus. And then the last thing is the question I think everybody has in their minds, which is competing with Shopify. So a couple of important points about this interview before we dig in. I find this important to say. Nobody's being paid to participate in this interview. I'm not being paid. Travis is not being paid. Nobody's being paid. So I insisted on that because I want us to be able to have, again, a frank and candid conversation. And the only thing that's sort of off the table today is anything that violates safe harbor agreements, because as we know, BigCommerce is a publicly traded company and there's certain things that they can't speak to. But as far as I'm concerned, and in my conversations with Travis, everything else is on the table and it's just us, mano a mano. So with that, I would like to bring Travis in. So let me go ahead and do that here. Travis, welcome. Great to have you here today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It looks like you're calling in from the Fortress of Solitude there, but that's actually your office in Austin, right?
This is my office in sunny Austin. Yeah, there's a lot of natural light that's unavoidable here just because of the windows and the time of year. But yeah, I can't complain.
It also looks like snow, oddly enough, which is funny because I'm the one in Chicago. You're the one in Texas, but you're the one that looks like you have snow behind you.
Yeah, no, I think it's like 65, 70 degrees today. It does look like snow. Is kind of a subset of woods behind me that brings some tranquility. There's the occasional bobcat or something else that pops out. But yeah, it is very tranquil, despite the industry and everything else going on in society these days. This is some semblance of tranquility here in the office.
Well, very nice indeed. So let's get you introduced to the audience a little bit for those who don't know you. So you started on the vendor side and then crossed over to the SI side. So as I understand it, you were at PFS Web, which was later acquired by LiveArea. Then a company called BVA, later called The Stable, which was then acquired by, not acquisitions here, acquired by Accenture, where you became a managing director. And then about 2 years ago, you went back to the vendor side to become the president and now CEO of BigCommerce. Did I miss anything?
I mean, it was a mouthful. Yeah, no, you didn't miss anything. I think, Yeah, I mean, it's been a great run. I've been mostly services side my career, almost exclusively, quite frankly. I've done software a couple times. This is the most notable time, but yeah, but been in commerce obviously a long time, 20 years. Was very fortuitous the last 10 or so with the run up of several acquisitions, which a lot of which is timing more than anything, but most notably, I think pretty much built agencies and run them around the top commerce platform or platforms since 2008, 2010, and so from ATG through Hybris, through Demandware and Magento into the subsequent acquirers of all of those, and then into the Shopify ecosystem the last 4 or so years prior to here, and now BigCommerce. So I've, right, wrong, or indifferent, I've seen most of it, if not all of it, and it's been a good ride. I wouldn't change anything.
Well, good, because it's gotten bumpy recently, and I thought it would be helpful to sort of kind of lay the predicate here and talk a little bit about where we are, at least how I see things in the space. So, by example, a company called Vtex, which is a competitor of yours, people know pretty well. They seem to be a good example of what's happened since the pandemic, where there was a tremendous amount of spending on digital, on a purchase of platforms and services, et cetera. But like many companies, there's kind of a rationalizing that took place after the pandemic. And they've been a bit hurt by this. You can see their stock post-pandemic has come down and sort of settled. And BigCommerce has had a somewhat similar trajectory. And so I thought it would be helpful to say, look, this is not just BigCommerce's issue, right? This is a lot that's going on in the industry right now. But I assume in reaction to some of what we see on the screen here, late last year, the board decided at BigCommerce that they had to make some pretty significant changes. You were elevated from president to CEO. You replaced your CMO. You brought in a new CRO. Let's talk, as we start here, talk to us a little bit about why that happened.
Yeah, I mean, listen, let's back up and talk about why I took the job in the first place. I've obviously had a lot of respect for the company for a long time, competed against them in different arenas. Quite frankly, was surprised when I was approached. I was at Accenture. We had sold the stable to them, I don't know, a year and a half prior. Was obviously deeply embedded with Shopify, lots of friends and people there I have a lot of love and respect for, and was a little taken aback that a services person would be approached to go potentially run go-to-market for a software company, especially a publicly traded one in the space. So was very flattered and touched by that. I had and continue to have a great relationship with my predecessor, Brent. Have a tremendous amount of respect for him as both a human being and as someone who sat in chair for 8-9 years here, and was just selfishly an amazing opportunity to come in and take advantage of a foundational business that is by all present and past definitions pretty substantial. I mean, $350 million of revenue in the space is larger than ATG was when they sold to Oracle, larger than Hybris was when they sold to SAP, larger than Demandware was when they sold to Salesforce, and larger than Magento was when they sold to Adobe. So to have an opportunity to come in there and leave my fingerprints on that and take advantage of the foundation that was already here was too much to pass up. That was the initial thesis coming in. And as with any new leader coming in, particularly around go-to-market, I'm gonna bring in some of my folks and folks that I know in the ecosystem. And so very early on, I had 3 new sort of SVPs in place around ProServe and customer service, one around strategy and offerings, and one around global partnerships. And then from there, as you noted, most recently, new CMO, new CRO. We brought on Tom Armstrong early on too. So really just attracting like-minded, experienced folks from the space that see the world through the same lenses I do, in the same, honestly, opportunity here. Good product, good position, good foundation, sort of a complicated go-to-market, just given where the company grew up. We had bought a couple of other assets in Feedonomics and MakeSwift, and just really a nice canvas by which to go make our own. And that was really the opportunity. I was not expecting other changes which happened, which, obviously I've been in chair since October, I think last year, and just an amazing opportunity to go kind of continue the evolution and really the transformation of the business, which is what we've really been going through, and doing it in a public market isn't easy, but I'm really pleased with where we've come from, where we're at, and where we're going.
Well, let's talk about some of those challenges of being a company that's transitioning, but in front of God and country in the public markets. And by the way, we had a comment here. There's a bunch of comments coming through, but Brendan Roberts says, keep the transparency rolling. So apparently what you're doing right now is exactly what people want to hear, which is exactly what's going on. But talk to us a little bit about what it's like to do that. And because obviously there's pressure around quarterly results, which doesn't always line up with the clock that you have in place to make a transition. So talk to us a little bit about how you're managing that, and just tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've never felt comfortable in a leadership role in a mature, well-oiled machine, right? It almost makes me feel uncomfortable and unsettled to just kind of captain some sort of ship that has no challenges or transformation going on. There's probably a lot of psychology people could unpack there, my personality and why that attracts me. But I've just found myself pretty consistently in these sorts of scenarios where you've got established businesses that are in need of a transformation. Most people by definition do not like change. And certainly, I've used frameworks and methodologies in my time. Coming from the services side, this is what a lot of services providers do. And so I think there's an added advantage there of having lived through the digestion of not only recommending these changes, but implementing them. And to whoever the gentleman's point was, like, transparency and crisp communication is really at the forefront of that. Having a North Star, explaining what it is that you're doing, even though a lot of those decisions are hard, just making sure you're over communicating what it is you're doing and why, and sort of orienting everybody in the same direction. Obviously hard to do in a public market. I think I've been pretty clear in earnings when we announced, at the end of October, some of the organizational changes, which included, a takeout of a fair amount of costs, and about 10% of employees at the time, unfortunately, were part of that, which was, as always, a horrible thing to have to do. But the thesis there was we had to do something differently. We had to change. That requires hard decisions. I like to make those pretty succinctly and pretty quickly, in the spirit of shareholder value and what I think is best for the business. And we took a subset of those savings and dropped it to the bottom line, which you saw reflected in some of our earnings we talked about a couple weeks ago. And the rest of it we reinvested back into quota carrying capacity, while we also transform the go-to-market muscle and our external messaging at the same time. So, we're driving the car 75 miles an hour down the road and doing a lot of things. That's fine. I've done it before. A lot of folks I've brought in have done it before. It's a journey. It's exciting. There's obviously macroeconomic pressures and stresses. Not a lot of folks do this in a public market, but where we are now is show me. Great. You've made these changes. You've hired a bunch of talent. Amazing. We're not getting any credit from Wall Street and the share price or things like that. They want to see ARR growth. And so we're about to go into the better part of this year where we're actually executing against all those strategies and changes. And the end goal is to grow ARR. It's that simple. It's not complicated. I feel really good about where we are, where we're going, and it's taken some time to align things to that with human capital and messaging and things like that. But I think through Q2 here and into the H2, we expect to see leading indicators of efficacy there, and then hopefully that translating into obviously bookings and growth and all the goodness that comes with growing ARR.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about sailing that boat into rough waters here. Just by way of context, we've seen this in our research through Master B2B, that compared to 3 years ago, the time frame in which companies need to show an ROI on B2B commerce these days is sped up. I mean, it's 100% clear that I think 70% of companies, we have a slide on screen here, says that companies have said they now are in a position where they have to speed up the time frame in which they show ROI, which puts pressure on, obviously, you selling a platform, which can be a major investment of time and money. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that last week, Commerce Tools The reduction in force of somewhere between 10 and 15%, some pretty senior people. I think most people thought Commerce Tools was doing quite well. And I think this came as a surprise to many people. We also have the tariff discussion going on right now. We have the downdraft from post-pandemic, but we also have AI emerging here. And so technology continues, right? It doesn't ever go away, but it feels like we're going through a period of transition here. And I wanted to bring up a quote that you had recently mentioned, which is, you said specifically about B2B, which is my, near to my heart. BigCommerce is doubling down on its B2B commerce strategy following a major organizational overhaul, with CEO Travis Hess emphasizing the company's newfound scale and focus in the space. That's from Zacks Equity Research. And you were quoted as saying, we're seeing a lot of greenfield manufacturers and distributors looking to digitize their operations quickly on modest budgets. That's literally what we just talked about. So, what are you seeing, and how do you see Shopify? I was about to ask, but how do you see BigCommerce winning in this space, given the macroeconomic challenges, some of the challenges with these companies, the shift away from the monolith to a composable, to even a post-composable environment? I'm kind of curious, where do you see these greenfield opportunities, and why BigCommerce?
Well, I think you've already touched on it a little bit a few minutes ago, Andy. I mean, on the TCO and the ROI, people need to see that quickly. So speed trumps everything. Speed and ease of use trump everything. So a lot of the efforts we're making, on the go-to-market side, being really deliberate about who our ICP is, where we deserve to win, what it is that we're doing that resonates tangibly with organizations in that ICP. And let's be honest, you're either helping people drive cost out, or you're helping them grow profitable revenue, or both. If you're not doing either, there's no reason to engage, and there's no sense of urgency to do anything. So, I mean, that's just brass tacks that I think all of us know. I think a lot of what we're trying to do is target the right type of organizations that map to what we feel are our differentiators, coupled with being really deliberate about, pre-composition and acceleration and reference architectures mapped and oriented to specific industries to take advantage of that speed to market. If you're doing something and delivering something faster, I think most people understand the concept that you're carrying overhead for a shorter period of time, and by definition would be less expensive. But at the same time, also aligning with partners, agency and SI partners, GSIs, to make this as digestible as possible to these organizations. Greenfield orgs need obviously something different than maybe a more established org. And so orienting these things towards that, not only the market and the industry, but also the level of maturity of a given organization is super important. And I think, again, just trying to make this as consumable and as digestible as possible, commercially, organizationally, technologically, is really where a lot of the effort and the focus is coming from. And all to your point, drive lower TCO, faster ROI, and just something that's easier to live with, that also is future-proofed in a way that mitigates risk. Because as you know, as you move up market, people don't buy shiny objects. They buy risk mitigation. They buy stuff that won't get them fired at the end of the day. Like, that's just reality. It's not front-end, whiz-bang, shiny stuff. It's, can this scale with my business now and in the future? And will this not get me fired? And so that is also overlaid into a lot of what it is that we're doing to, again, appease that subset of the market as well.
So can I get your reaction to a couple of things that happened? First, I want to get your reaction to what happened with Commerce Tools, since I've got you here. And any thoughts on why you think that happened?
I mean, why I think it happens would be pure conjecture. Listen, I have a lot of respect for what those guys have done, quite frankly. I think, obviously Kelly's not there anymore. He sent me a really nice note when I took this job, and he and I know each other. I wouldn't say we know each other that well. I was really touched when he sent me a note, despite still being there as a competitor. I sent him a note back. I think they've had some of the most amazing marketing maybe ever in this space, quite frankly, and carved out a niche for themselves. Listen, it's hard. They play in a very complicated TAM, way up market, with folks that by definition have embraced custom sort of approaches with large teams of FTEs to go build stuff because of the nuance and the complexity of the business. I don't care what platform you throw at those organizations. There's going to be heartburn, there's going to be overruns, there's going to be bumps and bruises and challenges. And it's a really hard TAM to serve. And it's also very narrow. It's just very few people have started really big enterprise and been successful coming down. I think it's easier to go down and come up than it is to start up and come down. And you saw, Oracle is a perfect example of that with ATG and then OCC, and then going out for a pack of smokes and not coming back out of commerce in its entirety. So I think they're going through some of those headwinds. Obviously, I can't elaborate on anything else because I honestly don't know. We certainly see them from time to time in market, probably see them less now, just given some of the changes. But, I certainly have friends there and have a lot of respect. It's tough. It's tough. It's a tough TAM. It's a tough, ICP for them, in my opinion.
Yes. In anticipation of this, we posted some stuff on LinkedIn to see what questions people have. And I want to get your reaction to some of the comments that people shared. And it's interesting. It's mostly about B2C versus B2B for BigCommerce. And, it's heartening for me to see this, but I saw over and over again, people saying that you need to focus on B2B. So let me give you a couple of, and I want to get your reaction. So a couple of reactions here. So this is Eric Morton, founder of Haven Commerce. He said the B2C site is over, or fight is over, I should say. B2B will be a slog as other players, e.g. commerce tools, have huge advantage at the enterprise level, and mid-market B2B has strong incumbent vertical players. I know you know Rick Watson, CEO and founder of RMW Commerce. Rick is quite prolific in his writing on
very prolific. I'm a big Watsonian, but yes, he is very prolific.
He was very direct and said it is well established that BigCommerce's only hope is in B2B. First, stop messing around. You literally have nothing to lose. Throw everything off the bus. And then one final comment here from Marty Armstrong, founder of Strong Arm Advisory Services. He says, double down on B2B. However hard that is, if there is still meaningful opportunity, given Shopify is not executed or seemingly focused on this, complexity is a real issue though. So let me ask you a couple of things here.
Yeah.
One, first of all, you want to take on any of these guys and share your thoughts. Are they right or wrong that BigCommerce should just chuck the B2C business, take the ARR hit, and go strictly B2B? Now, I want to hear your thoughts on that.
I think everyone knows the answer to that question. Listen, the business grew up a B2C business years ago. We have a large B2C install base. I don't think, if you go back a couple of slides, I'll address one by one just to make it clear. Or do we start?
Go back and bring them up on the screen.
Yeah, bring them back up again. You can bring Rick back up again. All right, let's bring Eric first. Let's talk about Eric first. So,
okay.
I don't believe the B2C fight is over. I think it's over for easy use cases, sure. And that's the brilliance of Shopify, and I'm sure you'll ask me questions there too. The brilliance of Shopify is they've already taken the easy. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, by the way. That's not easy per se to do. And certainly I was a part of that ecosystem and have a lot of respect and favor towards what I was able to do with a lot of amazing people over there. But the beauty of that product is it handles easy really, really well. But if you have to customize Shopify, it defeats the purpose for buying it in the first place. Now, the beauty of that product is they've expanded it to the extent where it obviously accommodates a broader set of use cases. And you could argue that it's worthwhile, even slightly more complex organizations may be molding themselves to fit their model. And I don't mean, again, that disrespectfully, but oftentimes those are brands that are strong enough on their own. They're not going to necessarily need the platform to grow per se. And again, don't mean any disrespect. There's still a lot of shit left that's complicated and has hair on it. We're a $350 million business. There's a lot of B2C here that's here for a reason. And there's a lot of stuff that's still at Salesforce, by the way. I know everyone dogs on Salesforce. Listen, they have a shitload of clients. They have most of the large branded global manufacturers in the world. They have a lot of retail in the world. There's a reason they're on Salesforce. It's not a shitty product. It's a very capable product for their ICP that isn't going and running into the arms every single time of us or Shopify or anyone else. So there's still plenty left. That being said, I agree with Eric. I don't think it's like 80% of the market. I think it's a subset. And I think we've got to be really honest and specific and deliberate about who it is we're serving and why. And I would argue composability, Rick will accuse me of it being flashy or trying to make it into something it's not. It's not flashy or anything. It's accepting the fact that more disruption and innovation will come by way of third-party ISV than we could ever possibly build ourselves. Like, I'm not interested in getting into an arms race with someone who spends $2 billion a year in R&D. No one's going to side with us on that. And by the way, I don't think the market wants features and functions. They want business outcome. So for us, we've got to be able to ingest best in class now and in the future, but we've got to make that easy. We've got to make it commercially, technically, and organizationally viable. And that's what I mean by it. So I still think there's a lot of B2C left. I think we could be better there. I think we'd be more deliberate. Let's go to the next slide and I'll look at Rick. God, he just makes me feel safe and scared at the same time.
Stop messing around. You literally have nothing to do is throw everything off the bus. Comment?
I materially disagree with this statement for obvious reasons. And again, I will echo the fact we're a $350 million business. We have a lot of longstanding B2C business. We continue to win B2C business. Yes, I materially, although I love and respect Rick, but I disagree with this. I disagree with this statement. It's just not a plausible option, especially as a publicly traded company. Let's go to the next. Is it Marty next? Yeah. All right. See, Marty was a little nicer. I agree with him here. And I think on the B2B side, it's an obvious, listen, I signaled in earnings, we've got 12,000 B2B accounts. The majority of our net new bookings have been oriented to B2B. I think it plays to our strengths really, really well. I think you would also argue it tends to be a bit more laggardy than B2C, which is very mature, heavily commoditized and demanding for all the obvious reasons I won't bore the audience with. I also think we've got a better opportunity to win here against our core competition, Shopify, if for no other reason their monetization model is all based on they're a financial instrument. They're not a platform per se. Again, I don't mean that disrespectfully. It's been brilliant in many ways, but it does not by definition align with B2B. Wholesale is not B2B. That's not, it is in some ways. It's not what we're talking about solving for with manufacturers and distributors. Wholesale, by the way, although people talk about things as if they're new, even though they've been around for a long time, I'm pretty sure EDI solved for this many years ago. Now, people may not be big enough to warrant that sort of dynamic, but I don't think anyone's solving any complicated use cases by standing up a separate site for folks to come in and buy at a wholesale discount. I don't think that's going to change the world or blow anybody's hair back. So I do think we have an innate advantage here. I think in our pricing and commercial model, I think our experience, I think having 12,000 B2B accounts, this is where we should win most of the time in an area that we're going to be way more deliberate about going after. We've historically treated B2B as additional features and functions as opposed to a bifurcated approach strategically that we've now completely transformed the business to go and address. We have a B2B sales team. We have B2B SEs. We have B2B account managers. We have a B2B pod in marketing. Like, we've completely bifurcated because we feel so strongly about it. We want to drive that authenticity and efficacy going forward.
But to play a little bit devil's advocate here, there is a zero-sum game when it comes to resources and focus, right? So on the margin, you may have to choose between B2B and B2C. So what about the comment that there's a focus, perhaps opportunity cost by still doing things in B2C when you could be, again, it's a more different market, longer sales cycles. I say it's hard to get into, hard to get out of when it comes to B2B.
It's true.
In a good way. But you're foregoing something, aren't you, by having the B2C side of the business that you could be focused on B2B? I'm not suggesting you do that, but there is an opportunity cost, is there not?
Yeah, of course. You've got to pick and choose. You can't do everything, obviously. But I think, one of the other advantages of composability and leading with APIs and making them more available, more robust, is we can actually offset some of that cost and effort by being way more ISV and partner friendly and having them help contribute into the ingestion of those capabilities. We've open sourced some other things as well to go accelerate, capabilities there as well. But I think on the composability side, I think there is a giant demand in market from ISVs that want to have deeper relationships, deeper partnerships, and very much view this as its own little marketplace, if you will, as we precompose third parties coupled with our framework oriented to specific markets. I think we can, save some time and save some costs, not only on the product development side and engineering side, but also on the go-to-market side, because the deeper you go with some of these partners, obviously, the more tangible contribution we're going together in market. It becomes a bit more of a consortium as opposed to maybe other models out there. That would be the argument. I don't think it's an apples to apples comparison, but I think it helps offset some of the obvious questions of, well, if you choose B2B, what are you just gonna not do anything in B2C? I think you can do both, but I think you got to be deliberate about how you do it.
So I want to get your quick reaction to that, because this did come up in some of the pre-conversation on LinkedIn. There were people who brought up the fact that they thought, for example, that BigCommerce should do a better job of certification programs for partners, provide free training like the way Google does and Salesforce, so that people between jobs could go get certified with BigCommerce. So ways of augmenting your partner channel. What are your thoughts on that?
I read that same comment. I thought it was brilliant, actually. And as soon as I read it, I think it may have commented on when you announced this session. We have a pretty large training and enablement group. It sits with our strategy and offering group today. I shared that with those folks. There's lots of things we've got going on right now in that respect. A lot of things we're doing also with AI to kind of speed up enablement internally and externally. We're really excited to continue down the path on, and we'll probably share more about that in next earnings. But yeah, I agree with the critique. Like, we could be better in a lot of different ways. And I think, being honest and transparent, most notably with ourselves, as well as our partners and customers, is something that we're really leaning into and, caretaking for. I don't profess to have all of the answers. I don't think anyone does here. And to the extent we can drive value to shareholders and value to our customers and our partners, we're gonna lean in. So I welcome any and all of those inputs, because the market's getting, with all the layoffs, there's a lot of talent on the street. There's a lot of folks that would welcome an opportunity to be enabled and trained, and it would only give us an advantage.
Well, let's talk about Shopify now. I've been waiting to do this. This is the quote unquote last category here. We're going to go a bit longer than the bottom of the hour. I hope that's okay with people. We wanted to leave open the opportunity to go as long as we could here. That's reasonable. So Travis, you have a few more minutes?
I do.
Okay. Let's talk about Shopify. It's clear they're focusing on B2B now. They hadn't historically. I mean, this is my impression. So I remember when they bought Handshake back in like 2013, 14, 15, I don't even know when it was. I knew those guys. Yeah. And I thought, oh, finally we'll get behind the veil here. We'll get to see Oz in person, because Shopify, when I was at Forrester, wouldn't talk to analysts. They wouldn't talk to Gartner. They wouldn't talk to Forrester, which I thought was just not a good move. Forget about our feelings. It's just not smart, because enterprises were asking us what we thought about it, and we just didn't have information to share, which means it was the blind leading the blind. And how's that good for anybody? So, but when they bought Handshake, I thought finally we'll be able to talk to the people at Shopify. And then it didn't happen. And it didn't happen really until about a year and a half ago, when they decided to open the kimono, to use a terrible metaphor that people have overused in the last 20 years. And now it's pretty clear they want to focus on B2B. And so on screen, we have a quote from Cleveland Research that says, B2B is still a small percentage of the overall Shopify revenue GMV, but it's growing greater than 100%. I guess it's a small base, but still. And they see this as a $14 billion TAM in a market ripe for modernization. So they have a plan here. What's your plan to counter Shopify?
Listen, I can't speak for them as to what, how they classify 14 billion as the TAM and who it is that they're targeting. I mean, listen, I think the general use case there that I've seen has been, a digitally native brand or a B2C oriented organization with wholesale requirements for B2B. Or, retail requirements because they're opening up a brick and mortar store. Well, Shopify's whole monetization model is to get that flowing through Shop Pay. So The answer in retail is, hey, here, go run our hardware and POS because I want to capture that GMV. That's unified commerce. Okay, I mean, it sounds like a bad episode of Quantum Leap, and it's 15 years ago, but okay, good for them. I would argue unified commerce is you have to go with value to customers at scale, regardless of channel and regardless of technology. Like if they're running, news store for POS, I should be able to take an order online, translate the promotion language, returns, all that stuff, and send it down for a customer to go pick up or return in store and do a lot of that stuff without them running my hardware. On the B2B side, yeah, sure, there are wholesale use cases of digitally native brands that have realized pretty quickly it's really expensive to acquire customers and grow. And they've now got to sell through wholesale channels and other channels, and they have wholesale needs there. To my point earlier around what EDI would have taken care of, years ago, that's great. I don't think that is necessarily complicated. When I talk of B2B, and it's probably like most folks talk of it, it's manufacturers and distributors that have your normalized, complicated business models of wildly complex catalogs, multiple sources of truth on the back end, highly manual processes in between, CPQ requirements and needs that also drive a lot of FTE labor and things like that, and a lot of just overall transformation. Like a lot of things have to be present for you to solve for those use cases. And most folks are not buying with a credit card. Last time I checked, in those use cases, they're buying on terms and POs, and that changes the landscape in a lot of this stuff. So all of the value that traditionally came out of what they did so brilliantly in B2C and Shop Pay is lost in the jet wash in a B2B sort of use case because, again, it's just a completely different need. I, again, don't mean it disrespectfully. I understand why they would want to go after it. They've got a giant market cap and they're growing at an amazing rate. And I don't want to take anything away from them, but there's only so much B2C shit out there. Like, they've taken all the easy stuff. Yes, I think we firmly established there's more, and I think they would agree to that too, but they've got to go in other areas to continue that growth trajectory, or they've got to come up with other products and things like that to their core to increase wallet share, which they're also trying to do. But that, like, to me, I feel it's apples and oranges. And I think our approach to composability versus they are very much a monolith. And I don't mean it disrespectfully. They believe they're going to build everything themselves, and that's going to be best in class. Good for them. I think they're right for a subset of the market. I would argue not everybody wants that. And we're building it differently. And we're building it differently for a myriad of reasons. One is to differentiate. Two, we just feel it's the best approach. We're also not saying it's for 80% of the market either. I don't think that it is. So I think there's room for everyone to win here. I think I'm going to be more and more clear about where it is we are winning and where we think we should win. And I think going forward, this will become a little bit clearer to the broader audience, because I think, to our own defense or our own criticism, we've been wildly trying to be everything to everyone, and it's confused the market. So I think the market has every right to have been confused unintentionally. And we're just trying to bring a little bit more clarity to what it is we're doing. And I hope that area is cleared here in the next, quarter or so.
Well, almost on cue, actually. Ironically enough, Rick is back, and he quite literally said something you just said, which he said, BigCommerce story is too complicated. Are you a baby commerce tools, or are you more flexible Shopify? It's an interesting argument because, some people will say we're a value version of commerce tools, right? We're more composable, like commerce tools is. Other people will say, well, basically you're just a more flexible version of Shopify, in that Shopify is more template based. It's more out of the box. You called it a monolith. So where do you position BigCommerce, and which one are you? So we can stop hearing from Rick.
Well, I mean, listen.
I mean that with all due respect, Rick. I'm joking.
But he does it with that smile. It's just like he desensitizes. I mean, you lower your guard and then wham, he nails you. Listen, baby commerce tools. I mean, I don't know what their ARR is, but I would guess we're double the size. I have no idea. Again, it's conjecture. We're much larger than they are. But if this was a spectrum and commerce tools is on the far right side of the spectrum as it relates to composability, and Shopify was on the far left, I would argue we're right of center. I would say, we are more leaning towards their model as it relates to composability than monolithic. We just happen to serve a customer in size closer to Shopify, at least for the time being, than Commerce Tools is. But what Commerce Tools is trying to do is come down into that middle area. Shopify is trying to come up. Ironically, if you think of that as a spectrum, they're both trying to go where we feel like we can really thrive. And I would say, to use an analogy, not everyone can buy off-the-shelf clothes, right? Some people can, they wear it flawlessly. I would argue a lot of people get it tailored. Some really bespokely because they want to and they look really good and they can afford it. And others because they need to, because their legs are too short or too long or whatever it is. Our customers are ones that, again, want to tailor their clothes or need to tailor their clothes. The easy stuff, I think we already know who's winning there and who has, for all practical purposes, won. I don't think that's us. We're going after the rest of the market, and we're going to be really deliberate about who that is and why. And, whether it's B2C or it's B2B, they're all going to share the same, they're going to share the same sort of perspective on the world. Like, their use cases cannot be, addressed necessarily through a monolithic approach, regardless of competitor, and they're going to need something different. And I think there's a large portion of market that agrees with it. We just need to make it easy. That's all this.
Well, that's a great point to end on. I think you hit it right on the head there. So I want to thank you, Travis, for A, joining for this, B, being very transparent, and C, using a little profanity. I kind of like that. I think it's a good thing. It's more
sorry. I'm sorry for the kids at home. I apologize. I try to only swear after dark, but occasionally when I'm hungry, when it's coming up on lunch, I can't hold myself accountable to that.
Well, I feel like we're going to have to do this again. This was fantastic. The comments I'm getting here, it's like, thank you for doing this. Thanks for being transparent. Do it again. I mean, there's just a lot of really good feedback, and I'm not just selectively here. So
has Rick Watson weighed in? Is he weighing right now? Is he?
Who's that?
I said, has Rick weighed in yet? Has he commented? I can't say anything.
I haven't seen him. No, I haven't seen him. But certainly many people have. And again, all positive about you coming forward and speaking your truth here, which I think is really important. So on that note, I want to thank you for joining. And then I want to do a quick wrap up here. So Travis, I'll talk to you again here soon.
Thanks for having me, Andy. I really appreciate the time.
So folks, wanted to just kind of, again, thank Travis for being a part of this and let you know that at Paradigm B2B, I do research on these platforms. That's why I know all these companies. And on screen, you can see that I did something called the Combine Evaluation. I've done this for 6 years now, I think, and 5 years prior to that at Forrester, where I authored The Wave. I have a different approach. It's based on not trying to do 2x2 boxes, which I think are oversimplified. I think it's much better to evaluate the individual athletes as opposed to the decathletes. And coming soon, I'm launching, in fact, in the next week or two, an interactive version called the eCombine, where you can personalize the results, where you can enter what your priorities are, and within a minute or two, get a recommendation on a platform based on my algorithm. So stay tuned for that. I mentioned earlier, also co-founder of Master B2B. Just quickly on that, we have a community of almost 600 of the best manufacturers and distributors in B2B, and that they're part of a larger community of nearly 50,000 people around the world who are engaged in B2B commerce. From our LinkedIn presence, it's pretty sizable there. I think collectively about 35,000 people. So if you're a manufacturer or a distributor and you're not a member of Master B2B, do join. Go to masterb2b.com and register. Lastly, we have a couple of roundtables through Master B2B that are coming up. We are the only group I know out there that actually goes to cities as opposed to making people come to them. So in the next 2 months, we're doing executive roundtable discussions in Cleveland, Denver, Minneapolis, Charlotte, Cincinnati, Los Angeles, New York, and St. Louis. We just did one in Dallas recently, and just prior to that in Atlanta. And this is the second year we've done this, and they have been exceedingly successful. And then lastly, next week, our most immediate event, we're doing our third annual Master B2B Summit. We have 100 of the top people from B2B commerce. You can see on screen here. We do it at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. We feed everybody in one room, and then we have breakout sessions through the day. It's a great networking event. There are no booths. There are no exhibit halls. It's just peer-to-peer networking. And again, it's next Wednesday. And we have a couple of seats left for attendees, and we have a couple of seats left for sponsors as well. So if you're interested, feel free to reach out to me. And then I'll close with, this was a departure. It's the first time we've ever done the Paradigm B2B version of a in-depth interview. But every Friday at noon Eastern, my partner Brian Beck and I do something called the Friday 15, which is 15 minutes. It always goes long, but 15 minutes of deep discussion about a particular topic. And if you aren't listening to that, you should. You can do it when you're riding on the bike or walking around at the soccer fields. But you can get it anywhere you can get your podcasts, on Spotify, Apple, etc. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining, and I really look forward to the very next version of this. And hopefully Travis will come back and it wasn't too painful for him, and we'll get even more insights. So until then, thank you everybody, and we'll see you soon.